Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about the Black Crusades, 1 through 12. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day, and if you have any suggestions, please comment down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Black Crusades. A Black Crusade is a military campaign unleashed upon the Milky Way galaxy when the forces of chaos manage to unite under the leadership of a powerful champion of chaos. They then proceed to launch a massive offensive from their base within the Great Warp Rift called the Eye of Terror. The most devastating Black Crusades have been led by the War Master of the Black Legion, Abaddon the Despoiler, the self-proclaimed heir of Horus, who has led multiple Black Crusades against the Imperium. Over the course of 10,000 standard years, the forces of chaos have launched a total of 12 Black Crusades. Millions of other attacks have been made on the worlds of the Cadian Gate by the demon Primarchs and lesser chaotic warlords, but the title of a Black Crusade is reserved for the times when a powerful chaotic leader is able to unite all forces of chaos. Much like a compact, a Black Crusade can be dedicated to one of the 4 Chaos Gods. However, the Dark Gods are jealously protective of the work of their champions. As such, a Black Crusade can only be dedicated to the Chaos God to which the War Master or the majority of the heretics are aligned to. A Black Crusade does not need to be dedicated to one god in particular, but an aligned War Master risks slighting his Dark Patron by failing to glorify it through his dreadful work. A Black Crusade dedicated to Khorne is a brutal campaign of slaughter across countless worlds, leaving little behind but gore-soaked soil and mountains of piled skulls. This is called a Tide of Blood. A Black Crusade dedicated to Slaanesh barely resembles a traditional war at all. Although planets fall before the invading presence of the War Master's hosts, they do so thanks to the influence of cultist networks and the allure of witch-spoken words rather than marching armies and fire bombardments. This is called a campaign of subversion. A Black Crusade dedicated to Tzeentch appears to pick its targets at random, as the Architect of Fate allows his champions to strike not only a current stronghold, but at their future as well. Seemingly insignificant targets become linchpins in a battle plan spanning time as well as space. This is called Advance the Inevitable. A Black Crusade dedicated to Nurgle fights not only with weapons and armies, but with one of the most basic principles of the universe, entropy. The vanguard of such a war is not soldiers or ships, but plagues, despair, and decay. This is called Triumph of Decay. The war hosts of Nurgle play the long game in battle, knowing that all things crumble with time. With a little help from plague ships and some sabotage, the enemies of the Flylord starve in their fortresses, as they find their supply lines become a vector for new corruption. Although the favor of the gods is important to all Black Crusades, no War Master can hope to do battle in the material realm without armies and fleets. The heretics might have been able to assemble such resources over the campaign, or they might need to call in debts and leverage their reputation to gather them. Even if the War Master already commands armies and fleets thanks to the heretics' previous adventures, it is possible to bolster his Black Crusade by using hosts, which can represent anything from warbands to traitor legionnaires or regiments of renegade Imperial Guard to teeming hordes of barbarians from a world such as Uxrant in the Screaming Vortex. These forces are called Crusade Forces. Guidelines on acquiring these forces vary, but they all are crucial to obtain, like naval fleets, which are used for one of 2 purposes: to wage naval conflict and to deploy forces to new territories. A fleet typically consists of at least one powerful capital ship and a small number of frigates or destroyers to escort it. Landing fleets have fewer warships and may lack capital ships entirely, but require bulk transport vessels or ferry troops and munition. Cults are important to Black Crusades. Cults within the Imperium can be used to weaken the defenders through sabotage and corruption. They prey on supply lines, and they weaken the resolve of planetary populations. The strength at arms of a War Master's forces may be supplemented by the powers of the Warp if he has access to a Cabal, which consists of a group of sorcerers who wield the powers of chaos to assist the battle of the War Master's hosts. While the War Masters will bind his forces together with a common goal, he cannot inspire, terrorize, and maintain discipline across every battlefield. For that, the War Master requires lieutenants. Lieutenants are subordinate champions of chaos who have sworn service to the War Master in exchange for a share of the plunder and the glory of the Black Crusade. And finally, the meat and drink of the Black Crusade are the mighty warrior hosts used to wage planetary war. They may be elite forces of Chaos Space Marines or ravaging barbarian tribes, but they all share in the appetite for blood and destruction. In general, a host can be a few veteran squads of traitorous legionnaires, several hundred disciplined and well-equipped soldiers such as renegade guardsmen, or anything else. Even the greatest war masters cannot assault the whole of the Imperium at once. Most Black Crusades begin as an assault against a single sector. Even the infamous wars launched by Abaddon the Despoiler typically start by besieging the territory or the region of space known as the Cadian Gate. To the eyes of many among the Screaming Vortex's most ambitious leaders, the Calic sector is a fruit ripe for plucking. Its military resources are tied up between a distant war in the Jericho Reach and a civil war in the region known as the Spinward Front. The smarter warlords are also aware of two assets available to the Imperium in this region that could tip the balance of any conflict: the Calexian conclaves of the Inquisitors and the Storm Warden chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. Neither force is suited for prolonged warfare, especially with much of the Storm Warden's strength on Crusade and the Jericho Reach. However, Inquisitorial or Space Marine strike forces are capable of executing raids with devastating effect. This sector is a potential Crusade destination. Those who pass for ambition among the followers of the Emperor see the Coronus Expanse as a priceless gem, but its value is considerably less to the followers of the Dark God. When rogue traders and missionaries see the region's untapped worlds as a great bounty, most warlords in the Screaming Vortex are more interested in toppling empires and seizing plunder than claiming an uncontested prize. Halting the Imperium's expansion is a worthy goal, and the Expanse also hosts many Xeno species known to provide excellent sport, or whose death pleased the ruinous power. Between rogue traders, orcs, Eldar, and the mysteries of the galactic halo, there are enough challenges in the Coronus Expanse to temper even a Black Crusade. By passing through the twisting passages of warp-scattered space, it is possible to travel from Screaming Vortex to the distant Jericho Reach, and emerge in the chaotic vortex of the Hadix anomaly. Countless lives are lost attempting to reclaim the fallen might of the once great Jericho sector. The Imperium has deployed the mighty Achilles Crusade to retake the region, which some war masters might take as a challenge to match with a crusade of their own. Kill teams of Deathwatch Space Marines, Tau colonists, and swarming Tyranid high fleets, combined with the teeming ranks of the Imperial Guard and the elite detachments of the Adeptus Astartes, make the Jericho Reach an almost impossible target. But the followers of Chaos know that the greater the opposition, the greater the glory. Abaddon the Despoiler made many bloody pacts with the Dark Gods in the wake of Horus's defeat during the Horus Heresy. In the 781st year of the 31st millennium, Abaddon made his first attempt to launch a new offensive against the Imperium of Man and initiate the First Black Crusade, also known as the First Battle of Cadia. It was the Imperium's first encounter with the newly founded Black Legion, and the return of the brutal and bitter enemy many had thought lost to the graveyards of history. To learn more about Abaddon, please check out our 40 Facts about Abaddon. Through alliance, threats, and promises, Abaddon was able to muster the largest force of traitor legions seen since the Horus Heresy, and took the Imperium by surprise. Worlds close to the Eye of Terror fell into mayhem and chaos as legions descended from the skies and demons tore their way into reality. Only Cadia, with its formidable defenses, stood firm, its brave regiments fighting from the towering gates and bastions of their cities. To counter the invasion, the Imperium was forced to divert many of the newly formed Space Marine chapters of the Second Founding from Warzone across the Segmentum Obscurus. On a dozen planets, the Black Legion proved worthy of their fallen Primarch and the martial prowess of the ancient Lunawubs. Abaddon had chosen his generals well, and each competed for glory as the Legion tore a bloody gouge across the galaxy. Zagtheon the Broken led his Black Legion warband in an orgy of violence and excess on the agri world of Valencia. For his own dark pleasure, the warlord constructed a vast maze of thorns from the world's blood rose orchards, blinding his prisoners and loosening them within its twisted tunnels before hunting them down at his leisure. Not to be outdone, another of Abaddon's lieutenants, Erelak, and his company of raptors brought a bloody nightmare to the floating hive cities of Melphia. Killing millions in their rampage, Erelak's warband sent dozens of cities falling from the skies as he tore out their complex suspender arrays and vented their plasma reactors onto the farms and fields below. Fashioning giant floating gallows from the remaining ruined cities, the warlord hung millions of Imperial citizens, their swaying corpses forever doomed to drift across the skies of Melphia, a terrible reminder of the power of the Black Legion. The Black Legion's greatest achievement was not only its brutal victories, but also the unity it had managed to forge among the traitors and their demonic allies. Even though the traitor Space Marine, demons, and heretics turned on each other once Imperial resistance had been crushed, in the presence of the Black Legion, they gave grudging respect. This was the legion of fear and domination Abaddon had created, and it was to be an ominous sign of things to come for the Imperium. As the bloodshed of the First Black Crusade reached its frenzy, Abaddon pursued his own plans, using the howling souls unleashed into the warp by so much death and destruction. He made a secret demonic bargain. In payment for the feast of despair, pain, and anguish Abaddon had created with the Black Crusade, the Dark Gods gifted him with knowledge of the secret location of the Tower of Silence on the world of Uralan. Abaddon was promised the knowledge of the secret location of the Tower of Silence on the world of Uralan by the Dark Gods. Cloaked in the shadow of the Eye of Terror, Uralan was whispered of in demonic lore as a place where the gods themselves lock away their secrets. Following strands of fate unraveled by his cabal of chaos sorcerers, Abaddon discovered a concealed path through the warp to reach Uralan without needing to breach the Cadian Gate. With a cadre of Black Legion's elite warriors, each one a brutal veteran of 1,000 battles, Abaddon set foot on Uralan and entered the Tower of Silence. Almost at once, the tower's guardians set upon them, ancient constructs of dark energy that shifted and flickered, their claws tearing at the ragged edges of their warrior souls. After a bitter battle, Abaddon climbed down into the mirror heart of Uralan. Abaddon wandered the massive haunted labyrinth for what seemed an age, fighting off the spirits of the dead that threatened to add him to their ranks. Abaddon made his way towards the center of the labyrinth where a shard of shifting darkness hung suspended in the air. Reaching out into the void, Abaddon felt the cold hilt of a blade meeting his palm, and he pulled it into reality. The demon sword, Drak Nyan, took terrible shape before his eyes. After the recovery of the Maleficent Sword, Abaddon's power swelled to inhuman proportions, and the new War Master of Chaos became unstoppable. Whole cities were burned in sacrifice to the ever-hungry demon of chaos, and entire armies were torn apart by the warp entities. Abaddon took his newly found powers and returned into the warp along with the Black Legion. He was now recognized as Horus Lupercal's true successor amongst the traitor legions. In the 597th year of the 32nd millennium, the War Master of Chaos, Abaddon the Despoiler, launched his second offensive against the Imperium of Man and initiated the Second Black Crusade. Abaddon wove a terrible curse upon a number of worlds close to the Eye of Terror, seeding them with a taint of the dark gods. Leading a small band of his elite warriors from the Black Legion, Abaddon breached an Imperial Navy base at Bellis Corona. Bellis Corona is an Imperial dead world located near the Eye of Terror, which serves as the Segmentum Oscurus primary base for the Imperial Navy's battle fleet, as well as essentially the Imperium's administrative capital for the entire Segmentum. While his fleet launched a diversionary attack against the orbital shipyards, Abaddon and his Bringers of Despair, the strongest and most vicious members of the Black Legion's Terminator elite, landed on one of the system's outmost moons, slaughtering the garrison. Abaddon crafted a complex sorceress ritual using the mangled remains of the guardsmen and invoked a curse that would sink deep into the core of the moon. It would be centuries later that the curse would be awoken and do its terrible work, unleashing a mutagenic plague upon the Imperial defenders stationed there. By the time Battlefleet Corona had mustered to repel the attack on the core worlds of Bellis Corona, Abaddon had already departed, his mission complete. Shortly after the assault on the shipyards of Bellis Corona, an attack occurred on the inquisitorial vaults of the world of Nemesis Tessera. Hidden beneath the layer of ice and snow, the Inquisition constructed a watch station from which to study the Eye of Terror, along with a warden's cells to hold the demonic prisoners they kept. It remains unknown if this was the work of Abaddon, but in a swift and brutal assault, one of the cells deep beneath the station was opened and the demon contained within was released. By the time the Inquisitorial forces had secured the facility, the attackers were gone, leaving only a trail of smoking corpses and spent bolter shells to mark their passage. In the 909th year of the 32nd millennium, Abaddon the Despoiler launched his third Black Crusade, sending the demon prince Talamin against the Cadian gates in a reckless and bloody frontal assault, but the true reason for the attack was not caught by the Imperial Guard. The shrine world of Gersthal had been a place of peace and tranquility throughout the Segmentum Obscurus, its faithfuls offering their prayers daily to the God Emperor. The planet was named for Saint Gersthal, who had fallen defending the Cadian gates during the 1st century after the Horus Heresy. Entombed under the world's capital, the saint was prophesied to rise again when the Eye of Darkness opened for the last time, and stem the tide of the treacherous. When Abaddon launched his third Black Crusade, he attacked the fortress world of Cadia to distract the Imperium from his desecration of the saint's tomb in an attempt to forestall the saint's possible contribution to preventing the Imperium's collapse in the far future. With whispered lies and promises, Abaddon unleashed the demon Primarch Talamin, the so-called Prince of Princes, against the Cadian Gate. Abaddon had convinced the creature that the blood of the loyal Adeptus Astartes would grant him unheard of strength and power to crush his demonic rivals within the Eye of Terror. In a gore-soaked assault, Talamin and his minions slew many millions of Imperial soldiers and lured no less than a dozen loyal Space Marine chapters to the battle. In the end, the ferocious warriors of the Space Wolves finally drove the demon prince screaming into the Immaterium, but Abaddon had already achieved his aim, destroying the remains of Saint Gersthal and forestalling any chance of the prophecy's fulfillment. Years later, Abaddon would return from the Eye of Terror. The world of Elfanor was the stronghold of the Cadian Gate, and a key defense against Chaos Raiders trying to slip out of the Eye of Terror into the Segmentum Oscurus. Commanded by the planetary governor known as the Cromarch, it had repelled countless attacks by the forces of Chaos in the centuries since the Horus Heresy. Central to the defense of Elfanor was the grand citadel of the Cromarch, overlooking the vast fertile floodplains of Erebor. The Black Legion descended upon the world like a plague of darkness, half a dozen warbands of the other traitor legions slavering for blood in their wake. The Imperial Guard struck repeatedly at the attackers, their assault supported by massed artillery from the citadel that remained long beyond the reach of the traitor legionnaires. Abaddon personally led the charge against the Citadel's adamantium gates. Through a storm of heavy bolter rounds and exploding artillery shells, only a fraction of the Bringers of Despair, Abaddon's Terminator-armored elite personal bodyguards, made it to the gates. The great obsidian road to the fortress littered with bloody and broken Black Legionnaires. Trapped before the gates of the Citadel, the traitors hammered against its mighty door, even as the Imperial guardsmen swept their ranks with fire from above. Raising his demonic sword over his head, Abaddon struck the gate, and the demon weapon split it like corkwood. With the gate sundered, Abaddon and his followers spilled into the fortress, butchering and dismembering all before them. Abaddon himself took the head of the Cromarch, tearing it from his shoulder in a bloody shower of gore before holding it aloft in triumph. Summoned by the nexus of death within the fortress and the final sacrifice, hungering demons ripped free of the warp and added to the pandemonium. When the last Imperial soldier was hacked apart, the forces of chaos fell upon themselves, lost in the joy of slaughter. Demons and traitors feasted on the ravaged flesh of Elfinor until it was dead, wasted planet, and the fortress of Cadia was left with a chink in its armor. Abaddon left the planet knowing that Cromarch and the ancient line was now forever extinguished. The Fifth Black Crusade included among its many atrocities the scouring of Elysia's sector, of the Segmentum Obscurus, culminating in the destruction of the ancient imperial city of Casser Lutean on the world of Tarnith. Abaddon purposefully orchestrated chaos invasions on a dozen worlds within this sector, entrusting the destruction of the imperial cities, shrines, and temples to his warlords while using his Black Fleet to keep the Imperial Navy's battle fleet, Obscurus, engaged in deep void skirmishes. It was Abaddon's intention to create a sector-wide conflict that would provoke a massive response from the Imperium and draw in chapters of the Adeptus Astartes. His plan set in motion, Abaddon led the bulk of his Black Legion to the city of Casser Lutean on the world of Tarnith, burning the great city to the ground and enslaving its people. When the Warhawks and the Venerator Space Marines arrived on Tarnith in chapter strength, they made an immediate assault on the city. At that same moment, Abaddon ordered the mass sacrifice of 10 million Imperial citizens, their blood funneled via the city's great canals into a vast lake of gore. Above the lake, a rift into the warp cracked open, and the demon Primarch, Doombreed, stepped into reality, howling in triumph. Abaddon had made a dark pact with Doombreed, promising it the skull of an entire chapter of Space Marines in return for its service. With thousands of bloodletters pouring forth from the lake of blood, Doombreed waded into the ranks of the Warhawks and Venerators. The Black Legion then sprang their own trap, and from prepared positions across the city, they opened fire on the Loyalists, blocking their retreat. Though they fought without fear, both chapters fell that day, their warriors mutilated by the demonic hosts, and their gene seed forever lost to the Imperium. The skulls of the fallen Space Marines were taken by Doombreed to be mounted upon the mighty throne of the Blood God. When Abaddon ascended to command of the Sons of Horus following the Slave Wars, not every warrior of the Legion swore allegiance to him. Many of the traitors clung to their worship of Horus as a god, believing that he would one day return to lead them and punish those who had forsaken his oath. One of these splinter warbands was the Sons of the Eye, led by the Chaos Lord Drakarth the Sightless. Drakarth had formed the Sons of the Eye out of those Sons of Horus who refused Abaddon's oath. A former battle brother of Abaddon's, Drakarth had been one of Horus's captains, escaping in the chaos after the Sons of Horus's demon world of Malium fell to the Emperor's children during the Slave Wars. Drakarth and his warband fled deeper into the Eye, only to return time and again to launch raids against multiple demon worlds, as well as other renegade warbands. They initiated the Battle of Keening Deep, where the Sons of the Eye defeated the Chaos Lord Voslok and his World Eater warband, claiming their fortress and hurling their foes' skulls into the world's soul fire. Dracarth personally ripped Voslok's demon axe from his grip during the battle, turning the treacherous weapon upon its former master. Abaddon had heard whispers of Dracarth's escape and treachery from his cabal of chaos sorcerers, who also claimed that one old ally would one day rise to subvert the Black Legion, twisting its loyalty with the memory of the dead Primarch Horus. Under the disguise of truce, Abaddon made a pact with the Sons of the Eye and allied with them during the Sixth Black Crusade. Abaddon wanted to make an example out of the Sons of the Eye, one that would serve as a dire warning to any that would consider challenging his power. During that campaign of the Sixth Black Crusade, Abaddon besieged the Imperial Forge world of Arkreach, offering Dracarth and his Sons of the Eye an equal share of the plunder. For months, the two forces of Chaos Space Marines fought side by side against the defenses of the Adeptus Mechanicus, bombarding their great forge cities from space. Finally, the traitors stood triumphant in the smoldering ruins of the great Manufactorii. Mechanicus dead littered the ground. As Dracarth extended his hand in greeting, Abaddon grasped it with his own, only to thrust the claw of the talon of Horus into his fellow Chaos Lord's gut. Dracarth lived long enough to see the Sons of the Eye bow to Abaddon and be reabsorbed into the Black Legion before the War Master of Chaos tore out his skull and spine. Thus did Abaddon deliver a dire warning to any who dare challenge his power. The Seventh Black Crusade began when the Black Legion fleet slipped out of the Eye of Terror undetected and fell covertly upon the worlds of the Imperium. Whole planets were lost before the Emperor's armies could muster the force to repel the traitor legions. Abaddon proved himself a masterful tactician and a match for the combined Imperial Navy commanders of the battle fleet Obscurus, repeatedly outmaneuvering their scouts and confounding their attempts to bring him to battle. While the Imperium tried to find and defeat Abaddon's fleets, his Black Legion laid waste to Imperial settlements and star systems. In the volcanic depths of the Harness Collective, the traitor legion broke their great stem seals and left millions to die screaming as scalding clouds engulfed their cities. Black Legionnaires assaulted the Adeptus Mechanicus Void Station of Nice, deep within the Megorium Nebula. The traitors ransacked the Void Station, taking ancient Eldar artifacts recovered by the Adeptus Mechanicus. When Imperial forces arrived, they discovered the Black Legion gone, and the station decorated with the corpses of tech priests and servitors. When the Blood Angel Space Marine chapter battled against the forces of Chaos in Midian, Abaddon singled them out with implacable fury. He led a band of coronet berserkers into the teeth of the Blood Angels' devastator positions. Even the Blood Angels' own assault troops could not dislodge the frenzied warband and recapture the bodies of their comrades, but there is an obscure reference to the Blood Angels being saved by an unidentified Space Marine chapter of mysterious origin. Written within the Canticles of Cassandra Lev, volume 151, the sisters' accounts of the War of the Seventh Black Crusade mention of a great-clad Space Marine chapter who came from the outer night to aid the Imperium, and whose jagged maw did swallow the stars, and who, black gaze, did mirror the void of oblivion. In the course of the Canticle, this unknown chapter's ship attacked the pursuing forces, as Saint Lev writes, fell upon the servants of the Scald Ones with great fury from the darkness, unseen as the beast that lurks beneath the black waters. Death for death, blood for blood. Thus were the sons of Sanguinius bought respite, and did turn back upon their pursuers, and so were the damned traitors of the false god driven unto their ruin. Images of these events can be found upon the walls of the cemetery world of Hypastisis, created to house the honored dead of those of the war, depicted in repeated frescoes in bas-relief. Curiously, the faces of the intervening Space Marines depicted there are obscured with the featureless discs of black obsidian. This notable engagement is listed by the Imperial savant as a special, probable encounter recorded sighting of this notorious and mysterious Space Marine chapter. While the Ghost War would rage for many standard years before the traitor legions finally retreated to the Eye of Terror, a single engagement stands out among the long lists of bloody deeds. On the world of Macan, the Black Legion and its allies faced a unit of Death Company Blood Angels. The Traitor Legion had ravaged the world, putting its remote dust mill towns to the torch, and tearing apart the grand cathedrals of radiance raised to honor the might of the Emperor. Arriving in time to halt the escape of the traitors, the Sons of Sanguinius set up defensive positions around the Black Legion's landing zone in an attempt to cut them off from their fleet. Although the conflict ultimately ended in the near extinction of the Blood Angels at the hands of Abaddon the Despoiler and his primary lieutenant, the Sorcerer Lord Iskandra Kayun, and the Swordmaster Telemachon Liras, the Blood Angels Reclusiarch Thalcian Joris became one of the few Imperial heroes to ever land a blow against the War Master of Chaos. With his chapter devastated, the chaplain endured weeks of hardship in the wilderness and the constant trials of keeping his crazed warriors undetected on Macan. When the time proved right, Joris led his death company in a lightning raid behind enemy lines, butchering the unprepared, sworn warriors of the Despoiler's honor guard, and allowing the Reclusiarch to lock blades with Abaddon himself. It is said that the Chaos War Master still bears the scars of that battle, even 3 standard millennia later. It is unknown why the Despoiler honored Joris once the war was over, perhaps in mockery, or perhaps with nothing but sincerity. After Macan, hundreds of Blood Angel corpses were desecrated, their gene seeds ruined beyond recovery. Of all the chapters, only a handful of bodies were left undefiled. Reclusiarch Joris and his death company, clad in their battered and broken black ceramite, were seated in the makeshift throne made from the armor of those Black Legion warriors they had killed on the fateful night. In the final decades of the 37th millennium, the Blood Angels were a broken chapter, ravaged by the Black Legion on the world of Macan during the tumultuous time of the Ghost War. Although the Angels restored their strength over the following centuries, for the first time it introduced the threat of mortality upon one of the proudest and most noblest first founding chapters. The Black Legion and its chaotic allies struck out from the Eye of Terror in every direction as the 8th Black Crusade raged across the stars. At first, the Imperium could only guess at the Traitor Legion's plans, as some raids accounted for genocidal extermination of entire settlements, where others only seemed to cause limited carnage by the horrific standards of a Black Legion. On the moon of Ticus, 8 of the 20 crater cities were peeled open to the void, their inhabitants freezing in place while others remained untouched. The charterous pilgrim vessel, the Divine Path, was waylaid en route, and 999 of its passengers were murdered in ascending order of the pilgrim token they carried. The rest were left to weep over the fallen. In what later became known as the Skull Gather, tens of thousands of men, women, and children were killed across the Segmentum Obscurus, in a variety of ways and in specific numbers. Their corpses left in ritualistic patterns. This slaughter was part of a plot to appease the Changer of Ways, the numbers and patterns creating a mathematical equation of terrible and profound perfection. While Imperial forces pursued the Black Legion, trying to bring them to battle, the Inquisition attempted to break the cipher, driving hundreds of adepts insane in the process. Finally, on the Forge world of Rithkarn, the traitors instigated a massive uprising of the mutant workers, plunging the world into chaos and ruin. In the confusion, the Black Legion sacrificed the council of ruling Adeptus Mechanicus Tech Magi in a gear of their own manufacturi. With their destruction, the complex sequence of deaths was complete, and the Master of Fates was greatly pleased, providing unknown benefits to the future plots of Abaddon the Despoiler and the Black Legion. The 9th Black Crusade was yet again a Black Crusade led by the infamous Chaos Champion Abaddon the Despoiler and his Black Legion, launched out of the Eye of Terror in the 537th year of the 38th millennium, intending to bring about the demise of the naval fortress of Cancephalus. Abaddon led his forces against the heaving populations of the nearby world of Antisanis. Manacor Hive, the hive city that served as the seat of Antichenes's imperial commanders, was besieged by Abaddon's vanguard. The Black Legionnaires burned and butchered their way through the lower levels, while Abaddon himself stormed in the inner sanctums. By the time the forces of the Imperial Guard arrived from Cancephalus to reinforce the devastated survivors, Abaddon and his favored legionnaires have already left orbit, dropping a dozen cyclonic warheads onto the ruins of Manacor Hive. In a last gesture of contempt, the 17-year-long war that ensues robs both planets of their most precious resources, manpower. Without the fleets of Cancephalus to stop him, Abaddon is able to ravage the rest of the sector at will. During this time, the Lamenter Space Marine chapter is recalled along with a number of other crusading chapters by the High Lords of Terra to help deal with the rising threat of incursions from the Eye of Terror. The Lamenter's fell reputation for suffering bitter reversals and dark turns of fate worked against them during their defense of the hive world of Corellian. From a chaotic attack, the superstitious-bound Mortifier chapter refused to fight alongside the Lamenters, abandoning the planet rather than serve beside fellow Astartes they consider cursed. Unwilling to desert the Hive World's population, the Lamenters held out alone against the Black Legion's onslaught for 6 standard weeks, suffering horrendous losses until the Ultramarines and the White Scars led a battle group that broke through the Chaos Warfleet to relieve Corellian. Reduced to barely 200 surviving battle brothers by their sacrifice, the Lamenters were deemed lost when their fleet disappeared into the warp storm soon afterwards, only to reappear more than a standard century later on the edge of the Segmentum Solar, having slowly battled their way back from the outer void. In the 10th Black Crusade, also known as the Conflict of Helica, Abaddon forged a dark alliance between the Black Legion and the Iron Warriors, making a deal with the Demon Primarch Perturabo. In exchange for Abaddon's agreeing to settle a debt for vengeance against the Iron Hands, Perturabo opened an ancient warp route out of the Eye of Terror for the Despoiler's Black Fleet to pass through. The passage, calculated over several agonizing months by the tortured machine spirits of a chain of enslaved cognitors, allowed Abaddon's forces to steal past the layers of defenses of the Cadian Gate and into the Helica subsector. Abaddon employed a carefully planned deception, sending the Black Legion fleet against Thracia Primus, the capital world of Helica, while he attacked elsewhere. The Despoiler also scattered his warlords across the sector, and on scores of planets, the traitor vessels thundered down, killing many Imperial citizens. While his warlords indulged themselves in the slaughter of Imperial worlds, Abaddon traveled with the Iron Warriors to Medusa System, the volcanic homeworld of the Iron Hand Space Marine chapter. From the ancient flagship Vengeful Spirit, Abaddon watched as the Iron Warriors laid siege to the Loyalist chapter. In a war of attrition, the Iron Warriors systematically assaulted the outer world of the Medusa System, tearing down the Loyalist defenses one by one. In the burning light of their ruined fortifications, the Iron Hands struggled to hold back the traitors, buying time for their support companies to arrive. Before the bulk of the Iron Hands and their Imperial allies could arrive, Abaddon and his Iron Warriors retreated, leaving hundreds of dead Loyalist Space Marines in their wake. Though Medusa still stood as an Imperial bulwark, Abaddon had learned much about its defenses and the Iron Hands themselves, both of which he would put to good use later. At the outset of the 11th Black Crusade, Abaddon bound a demon of Tzeentch within the oculus of his vessel, hoping to find a path through the tumultuous warp storms around the Eye of Terror into Imperial space. Tormented with impossible riddles and twisting falsehoods, the demon was driven completely insane, leading Abaddon thousands of light years off course. The demon tore into its own substance in the vortex of madness, bending time and space around the fleet. Abaddon's warships were scattered across the void of real space. Undaunted by the failure of his demonic navigator, Abaddon let loose his Black Legion upon the nearest planet, the Imperial Cardinal World of Reloria. Descending on Reloria, the traitors encountered a rival for their prize, an Orc Wa, led by warlord Morgwark Underteeth. In a vicious and chaotic three-sided war, demons and orcs ripped each other apart in the burning ruins of Reloria's vast reflectionary towers. Abaddon used this chance encounter with the orcs to conduct unspeakable experiments with demons and alien creatures, attempting to fuse the material and the immaterial together into some new manner of horror that can be inflicted upon the forces of the Emperor. Fascinated by the psychic link between the orcs and their instinctive use of warp energy, Abaddon took thousands of the green-skinned Xenos back with him into the Eye of Terror to continue his research. The Black Legion eventually retreated from Reloria, leaving the battered survivors of humanity to defend themselves against the remaining orcs. While the vast majority of the Imperium of Man's defenses around the Eye of Terror warp rift in the northwestern reach of the galaxy are based in an area known as the Cadian Gate, there are many Imperial monitoring stations scattered throughout the Segmentum Obscurus. These outposts are constantly raided and attacked by various forces of Chaos Gods, but during the 2nd century of the 41st millennium, the number of assaults dramatically increased. The most important of these attacks that served as the prelude to the horrors that were soon to come was the assault on the Imperial Watch Station on the world of Arx. Due to its low strategic importance, Arx was inhabited by only a small garrison of Imperial Guard, which was tasked with protecting the few tech adepts of the Adeptus Mechanicus who were needed to maintain and operate the station's observation equipment. Early in the 139th year of the 41st millennium, the Imperial Navy scout frigate Ascendance received a telepathic plea for help from the Erich station's elderly astropath. The identity of the attackers was unknown, and when reinforcement arrived a full 4 months later, there was no sign of the raiders. The Imperial Guardmen stationed on the planet had been wiped out, and their bodies had been horrifically mutilated and left to be devoured by the wild dogs that were Erich's only true predators. The Inquisition sent one of its agents, the experienced Inquisitor Horks, to Arx to investigate the matter, but there was little evidence left for him to sift through. If Arx would have been the only outpost attacked during this time, the raid would have become just another unknown in a galaxy filled to bursting with enigmas. Yet over the next 3 years, a number of similar attacks were reported throughout the neighboring star systems, and then spread into the adjacent subsectors. Inquisitor Horks suspected that some large plot against the Imperium was in motion, yet he could not find evidence to support this well-honed instinct, or identify the nature of the attackers, so he decided to watch and wait for this canny enemy of the Emperor to make his next move. In the 140th year of the 41st millennium, several Imperial patrol vessels made grisly discoveries in the Athena sector. A number of Imperial merchant starships and warships, one of them an Emperor-class battleship, were discovered to be drifting through the void uncontrolled. Upon being boarded, it was learned that the crews of all these ships were dead, their stinking, disease-ridden corpses strewn along corridors and control panels, some still manning their stations. Each starship also bore the scars of weapon fire and a brief space battle, as well as signs of being boarded, though none of the enemy dead could be found. Inquisitor Horks puzzled over these developments, while his acolytes and spies brought him more news. A rumor had spread among the vessels of the Imperial Navy in the Segmentum that the attacks were being carried out by an ancient Chaos warship called the Black Claw, a vessel whose diseased followers were dedicated body and soul to Nurgle, the Plague Lord, and had been attacking Imperial shipping for close to 4,000 Terran years. The infection of the decimated ship's crew and the reappearance of the Plague Claw were no coincidence, a reality which became all the clearer when the Death Guard Traitor Legion, the Chaos Space Marine dedicated to Nurgle, sacked the hive world of Morgengast. Horst became convinced that the forces of Chaos were planning another massive incursion against the Imperium, united as Chaos Undivided. The watchposts around the Cadian gates were put on high alert, and Imperial Navy warships from all over the Segmentum Obscurus were ordered to defend the space around Cadia. While Inquisitor Horks investigated the chaotic activity around Arx and its neighboring star systems, events turned even more sinister in the Gothic sector. 2,500 light-years from Arx, the navigators of the Navi Nobilite reported great disturbances, more than usual within the warp. On many worlds in the sector, this news was received with panic, a situation made even more precarious by several religious fanatics declaring that the Emperor was displeased and was sending warp storms to purge the sinful. A number of new hardline religious sects formed, their adherents stricken with the feelings of impending apocalypse. They were desperate for the Emperor's forgiveness and began to flagellate themselves and demand that their friends and neighbors purge themselves of their sins in the sight of the God Emperor. On many planets in the Gothic sector, these cults became very politically powerful, swelling by popular support to such a degree that the ecclesiarchy could not stop the rampaging mobs of hysterical flagellants. As the religious hysteria spread, lynch mobs roamed hive cities and mining colonies alike, seeking the impure. Impromptu burnings and hangings became common as the desperately fearful citizens threw themselves into a fever of abandon, scouring their friends and loved ones to atone for real or imagined sins against the Emperor. Yet all was not to avail, as the warp continued to become more active. The frequency of warp storms and its intensity continued to grow. Under the cover of this widespread paranoia and the religious excess, secret cults and covenants insinuated themselves into position of power, subverting ever more people to their dark cause. Misguided followers of the ruinous powers openly proclaimed that the Chaos Gods would save humanity when the Emperor had turned from them. Thousands, even millions of desperate Imperial citizens were deluded by this false promise, flocking to these cults, and the Inquisition Ordo Hereticus was hard-pressed to root out every Chaos cultist. To make matters worse, several Imperial Navy vessels were destroyed in the dock by plasma reactor overloads and magazine explosions. Though official reports declare the incident to be an accident, many believed that the tales of sabotage and rebellion within the Navy was true. While the Gothic sector was being engulfed in anarchy, religious strife, and confusion, Inquisitor Horks was searching for more clues to the plans of the heretics. When he heard of a chaotic attack on the Imperial world of Purgatory, he chose to accompany the investigating Imperial fleet. There was one thing which made Purgatory different from a dozen of other chaotic raids in the region: the device known as the Hand of Darkness. The Hand of Darkness, its existence was known only to a few of the most trusted members of the Inquisition, for the Hand of Darkness was an incredibly ancient alien artifact located deep beneath the planet's surface of Purgatory. And those were 40 facts on the Black Crusades. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, share it with your friends on Facebook, Reddit, whatever social media you guys use. It helps out the channel when you do so. And thank our patrons on Patreon. It's because of them that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. But with that said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Oh, what is this? put my freedom back in any